He hesitated for a moment, and then finished the sentence in his usual frank, outspoken way. "Unless you are sweet yourself on Miss Gwilt." Those last words heaped fuel on the fire. They stripped the truth instantly of all concealments and disguises, and laid it bare to view. Allan's instinct had guessed, and the guiding influence stood revealed of Midwinter's interest in Miss Gwilt. "What right have you to say that?" he asked, with raised voice and threatening eyes. "I told you," said Allan, simply, "when I thought I was sweet on her myself. Come, come! It's a little hard, I think, even if you are in love with her, to believe everything she tells you, and not to let me say a word. Is that the way you decide between us?" "Yes, it is!" cried the other, infuriated by Allan's second allusion to Miss Gwilt. "When I am asked to choose between the employer of a spy and the victim of a spy, I side with the victim." "Don't try me too hard, Midwinter. I have a temper to lose as well as you." He stopped, struggling with himself. The torture of passion in Midwinter's face, from which a less simple and less generous nature might have recoiled in horror, touched Allan suddenly with an artless distress, which at that moment was little less than sublime. He advanced, with his eyes moistening and his hand held out. "You asked me for my hand just now," he said, "and I gave it you. Will you remember old times, and give me yours before it's too late?" "No!" retorted Midwinter, furiously. "I may meet Miss Gwilt again, and I may want my hand free to deal with your spy." He had drawn back along the wall as Allan advanced, until the bracket which supported the statuette was before instead of behind him. In the madness of his passion he saw nothing but Allan's face confronting him. In the madness of his passion he stretched out his right hand as he answered, and shook it threateningly in the air. It struck the forgotten projection of the bracket, and the next instant the statuette lay in fragments on the floor. The rain drove slanting over flower bed and lawn, and pattered heavily against the glass, and the two Armadales stood by the window, as the two shadows had stood in the second vision of the dream, with the wreck of the image between them. Allan stooped over the fragments of the little figure, and lifted them one by one from the floor. "Leave me," he said, without looking up, "or we shall both repent it." Without a word, Midwinter moved back slowly. He stood for the second time with his hand on the door, and looked his last at the room. The horror of the night on the wreck had got him once more, and the flame of his passion was quenched in an instant. "The dream!" he whispered under his breath. "The dream again!" The door was tried from the outside, and a servant appeared with a trivial message about the breakfast. Midwinter looked at the man with a blank, dreadful helplessness in his face. "Show me the way out," he said. "The place is dark, and the room turns round with me." The servant took him by the arm, and silently led him out. As the door closed on them, Allan picked up the last fragment of the broken figure. He sat down alone at the table, and hid his face in his hands. The self control which he had bravely preserved under exasperation renewed again and again now failed him at last in the friendless solitude of his room. And in the first bitterness of feeling that Midwinter had turned against him like the rest, he burst into tears. The moments followed each other. The slow time wore on. Little by little the signs of a new elemental disturbance began to show themselves in the summer storm. The shadow of a swiftly deepening darkness swept over the sky. The pattering of the rain lessened with the lessening wind. There was a momentary hush of stillness. Then, on a sudden, the rain poured down again like a cataract, and the low roll of thunder came up solemnly on the dying air. End of chapter 8.